Good afternoon. It's quite wonderful to be here to be talking about this very important topic, and I'll be talking about my paper, which I've entitled "Do Perceptions Regarding Self-Expression Influence Voting in Malawi, or is it associated with voting in Malawi?" My name is Kokani Tijarachirwa, and a bit more of myself. I work with the University of Malawi, and my PhD is in economics. I got it from the University of York in 2020, so quite recent. I'm a lecturer, and I'm not a political scientist, so I'm learning issues about politics because I'm trying to work on things to do with politics and the economy. So I'm learning it the hard way, which I didn't have to go in class, but through this kind of analysis of the different surveys from the different data sets that I am working on. So what is it that I want to do? What's the aim of my study? So my aim is to assess community perceptions on self-expressions, whether they're associated with voting in a general election in Malawi. And before I go deep into that, let me talk a bit in brief about voting in Malawi. So, in Malawi, we use a multi-party system of government. Quite a number of parties get involved in elections. And for instance, last year, if my correction is right, we had about, I think, in 2019, we had about 15. For 2020, I think the numbers went down. So even though some contest on party tickets, others they go in as independent candidates, it's allowed. And people who are citizens who are aged 18 and above are the ones who are allowed to vote, and even foreign nationals. But there's a condition that they have to stay in the country for about 7 years. Currently, we're using the 15 plus 1 system of government that started around 2020. In the past, we used the first past and post system, and the overall election is governed by the Malawi Electoral Commission, who are the boss in the election dispatch. Our elections, international observers are allowed to come and oversee the process as well, to make sure that things are credible, things are not done out of the window, because they're stakeholders. They finance the elections, they finance various things within the election, so they have to be there when the elections are happening. We vote in the open area, as you can see. We don't go into hidden something, but everybody has to go into their own cubicle to cast their vote independently, like that. So, what's the research issue that I'm interested in here? Uh, we all know that democracy is built on the tenets of self-expression, and because self-expressions tend to allow or enable the sharing of ideas for people. And in one way or another, in essence, when people share the ideas, they end up finding solutions to their daily problems. There might be issues to do with poverty, issues to do with hunger, issues to do with politics itself. And self-expression doesn't stop there. It affects even people's participation in a democratic dispensation, and that's according to Denfler and Herbert 2015. Oh, that said, what is it that we know about the subject in Malawi? I must admit here, I've had a big challenge in terms of finding the data set. The internet hasn't been helpful. There are some things we tend to take lightly, to say that, okay, this thing has been done. And then when you go in the internet, you get surprised that you can't get something out of it. Maybe, probably people have got papers in their drawers somewhere. So it would be good if somebody can share some literature, especially in Malawi, so that at least they form the background. But even such the case, I found some interesting papers by Chung and Chinsing in 2006 and 2017 that indicates that voter apathy is on the rise. But then these papers do not necessarily link the voting behavior to people's socioeconomic characteristics, so that one could know whether it is an issue to do with their self-expression or other characteristics. An interesting one was also found by Chikapa, and they were asking why is it that people do not like voting for women or putting people in position. And the thing that they established here is that it is difficult to approach women because they do not want to accept any constructive criticism. So this is a clear indication of something to do with self-expression. But even though Chikapa is indicating this, Chikapa does not indicate actually whether this is linked to voting also. Having said that, so what's the research issue? What's the research problem that I'm trying to address here? We all know that Malawi is a free country, and even our schools by the Chatham House, Freedom House, not Chatham House, yes, Chatham House as well as the Freedom House. The Chatham House indicates that our scores on political rights is around 26/40, and on civil liberties 36/14. But at the same time, when you go through the Chatham House research reports, they're indicating that we are doing good on democracy, all right? And within the same year, like last year, 2020, this was even manifested by the Chatham House when they awarded the judges on an issue to do with the 2019 electoral case. And this brings in some interest to say, okay, so does it mean our democracy is it's going towards the right direction? But even though such is the case, Chinsinga and Chunga noted that there's voter apathy by using the registries from the Malawi Electoral Commission. And in the recent election, this was even manifested in 2020 and 2019. There was a huge difference. In 2020, in 2019, 74% of the registered voters came to cast the ballot. But in 2020, things went down just about 64%. And then to substantiate this, I went on to do some trained analysis on the Afrobarometer data. And just an online analysis, it is showing this trend in terms of whether people voted or not in a general election. So for 1999, you can see that it was 90, and it goes down, and then all the way down to 2014, 2015, showing just about 70%. And this is quite interesting because we are seeing for 2019, we might say that, well, probably the fear of catching the coronavirus might have affected people from going and casting their vote. But from the other findings that we had shown previously, the puzzle is that we are saying that the civil liberties are improving, going down, but at the same time, voting turnout is going down and the civil liberties are improving. That brings in a puzzle to say, okay, well, if that's the case, are these linked to people's perceptions regarding voting, or perceptions regarding whether their leaders listen to them, perceptions regarding whether their opinions are taken into consideration? That's what this paper is trying to do. So, does this study matter? The answer is yes. Why is it the case? Malawi is a nascent democracy. It's just coming out of the time of when we were under dictatorship for 30 years. And when the Kamuzubanda government was ousted somewhere in 1994. So the growth of this democracy pretty much depends on citizens' political participation, and it's very crucial. And if citizens participate, if citizens do not participate? For instance, there's low voting. It means less competent leaders definitely may be put in power. And in the end, what will happen? It means we need to forget about achieving our Vision 2063, which sets up that our country should be self-reliant by 2063. We should forget about the SDGs 2030. We should also forget about the Pan-African Agenda 2063, because all these depend on having some good leadership, which comes from people taking part in voting. So I'm using data from the GLD and that was is the LGBI data, which was collected in 2019 in Malawi in September by the Institute of Public Opinion and Research in Zomba, in conjunction with the University of Gothenburg. It had about 10,302 respondents, quite a huge sample. This study is also happening in other, also was happened in other countries, Kenya, Zambia, Malawi, Nairobi, Lusaka, in Zambia. Okay, so in Malawi, it was done in Lilongwe, the capital city, and Malawi border with Zambia. I'm only focusing on the Malawi data set for now. In terms of analysis, I'm pretty much adopting quite a number of methodologies. The first thing that I would do is to present the univariate analysis, the frequencies, and then do the cross-operations between voting and the socioeconomic characteristics, as well as the perceptions and the socioeconomic characteristics, and then also do a probate regression on if perception affect voting. Now, we know that there might be, I'll use also matching estimator in order to improve on causality, in the sense that matching allows one to interpret the results as being causal. But there's a caveat to it. What is it? We know that voting and self-expression, they might be reverse causality. Okay, one might cause the other. So, because of that, it's a reason why we're using matching estimator. So, under this method, what exactly is it that we do? The question or the approach is very simple. We're simply asking, is there voting between those who have a high perception of that they can express themselves in the community and those who perceive not? Okay, does it affect voting? So when we match the individuals, the difference in voting is just due to that perception. That's the whole idea behind it, right? Our dependent variable is basically a binary, just defined as 0 or 1, whether somebody voted or not. Like the way these guys did, they did vote. For me, I did not, because that time I was locked up somewhere in the UK whilst I was still doing my studies. So with the COVID, I couldn't even fly back home to vote. So 1 if a person voted, and 0 if they did not. And the main independent variable, the one that we use to capture perception, is derived from 5 questions. Okay, they asked if people have a say in what chiefs do, what local leaders do, religious leaders do, and what parliamentarians does, as well as the local council and all that. So if you look at these questions, they are basically questions that ask the channels through which for instance, our politics works in, because they use people like chiefs, local leaders, even religious leaders. People campaigned in churches, mosques, and other religious places, as well as the members of parliament and all that. So, based on these variables, I create an index using multiple correspondence analysis. Okay, and this create index, I then split it in 4 quantiles. After having that, I then create another binary index that captures 0 if less perception and 1 if high perception, that I use in the matching estimate. So the other control variables include marital status, sex, location, where one lives, if respondent dwells in urban, and 0 if in border, and then the age groups, education, and the worthy quantiles. In terms of the univariate, we can see that 72% voted. Okay, many voted, and it was mainly a female sample. It's a female sample because we defined 1 if female and 0 if male. So the 36% here stands for male. That means 100 minus 36 is a proportion for female. Most of them have primary education, 6%, and majority are young, between 18 and 35. So 18 and 35, these percentages here. And Moving out from that, we find that there's a good association between age groups and the high perception of voting or not. Not only that, there's also some bit of a good association between education and the perceptions, but we don't find a significant association with the quantums. That might suggest that there's no difference in terms of perception by whether being rich or not rich. Regarding voting, we see that pretty much the young ones are less likely to vote. Okay? Concurring with the having less perception that we noticed previously. And then the less educated, as you can see, the percentages here are pretty much higher. The ones likely to vote probably maybe looking for a better life. And then not so much differences across wealth again that we notice here. Okay, not significant, but the others are significant association. Now, from the regression results, we find that indeed, in support of the bivariate analysis, the young ones are less likely to vote. If you can see here, you see that the reference category is 18 to 24 age group, and then our age groups beginning 25, 35, and up are significant here. Okay, in the O sample. What that means is that, for instance, let's take age group 25 to 34 here. There's a coefficient of 0.16, meaning that being in the age group 25 to 34, there's a probability of 0.16 likelihood of voting as compared to those in age group 18 to 24. In other words, there's a 16 percentage point likelihood that people in age group 25 to 34 are likely to have voted in a previous general election as opposed to those in 18 to 24. The same interpretation applies to the others. On the perceptions, you can see that the higher the perception, the more likelihood people voted. So, for instance, in quantile 4 of the perception, we are saying that there's a 3% chance that they voted as opposed to the ones in reference category of quantile 1, or the lowest perception at all. But we notice some heterogeneity across gender when we run the separate regressions, all right, but still the result stands for the perceptions variables. Having done the regressions on the probate regressions, now the next question is, what are the results on matching? So before we go to this, we need to undertake some diagnostics that will give us the go ahead in terms of our matching estimation. So the first one is what is known as character variable balance, and then the common support check. So on the variable balance, characteristic balance, we need to plot the distribution of the propensity scores before matching and after matching. Before matching, they have to overlap between the treated and the untreated. In other words, those with a higher perception and those with a lower perception, their distribution of the scores have to overlap. So as you can see from the kernel densities here, these ones have overlapped by an intersection here. After matching, these two kernel densities have to come closer or have to merge. That's the whole idea behind matching, meaning that you have now put people with the same characteristics together. Having done that, we then look at within the groups, can you now compare the people? So we plot what is known as a common support, or in other ways, we do the common support check to see, is there a group of people with high perception that you can compare in terms of to match them with the ones without with the low perception. So looking just at these bars, you look at each independent bar if it has a corresponding bar across it. So all those with the top part is for the treated and the lower part is for undertreated. You can see that almost all the distribution of the propensity score has got a corresponding bar, implying that we can compare or do the matching. So our results from the matching indicate that the treatment effect is between 0.09 to 22. In other words, the coefficient has rendered around 0.2. It's positive and significant at the 5%, meaning that having a high perception, or people who had a high perception voted in the 2019 general election. That's what it means. In other words, good perception leads to good voting. So what is it that the result is saying? We found that 70% of the people voted, and this is in line with also the registry data from MEC, which was about 74, so they are pretty much close. And then the regression analysis from the probate showed that indeed positive perception leads to voting, and that's supported by the matching results. So what are the possible channels through which we can say that our results are working? So things such as education by other institutions such as the National Initiative for Civic Education, the German Technical Cooperation, USAID, European Union, these ones have been involved very much in education involving democracies, expressions, liberties, and the like. But also, we may not rule out what is said by Soyo et al. 2019, who said that perceptions may work in the sense that if people perceive their leader to be good or understanding, they got vote for the fear of losing the candidates. Despite that important result, I'm cognizant of the limitations. The first thing being that instrumental variables only controls on the observable. It doesn't go beyond the unobservable. So it is important that people might use instrumental variable estimation. Not only that, it might be also good to do a longitudinal study to follow the same individuals over time to help in understand the dynamic and nature of the behavior. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your comments and questions. Goodbye.